Good morning, Mayberry. We aren't going to talk about the rebranding and conflation of slavery, fallout, general racism, and class war. We aren't going to talk about PETA activists de-anthropomorphizing black people to make their points right now. We don't have time. We're going to talk about whatever I edit in next. Because I'm the producer, I'm the host, and I made this music. I'm Shift Orion, and I'm not waiting on Superman. I be talking about centrists sporadically in different episodes, but I really want to go in on them right now. Fuck centrists. We need to marginalize them. We need to marginalize centrists. They're taking up too much fucking space and they suck. And so it's basically like this. You're on the train, you're on the BART, I'm in the Bay, you're on the BART, and there's the splay dude. You know, like the splay dude. He's like sitting there, he's got a book and it's on one leg. He's got like his elbow on his thigh, you know, like just above the knee. And his knees are so far apart. Like it's just, he's taking up 3 seats at least. The seat his ass is in and 2 additional seats for each fucking leg so that his splay, like he does not need that much room to breathe. There's no function for that shit in any way that is remotely reasonable in a public environment. And this, if the BART is empty, is one thing, but it's like the guy that doesn't recognize the train is filling up kind of energy, right? And these centrists are sitting in society just like that, taking up too much fucking space, more than they need to survive. And that's been the trend for generations. And it's beyond that and has been for a while now, to the point that they're splaying so far and acting, oh, we're so comfortable splayed out like this. And in reality, it's grinding their hips out of place. And they be like, oh, I got to go get my hip replacement now. Oh, no. Oh, no. You know, when that happens and they're doing it to themselves and they create, you'll need to be cared for when you're healing from this treatment that you had to receive because of this thing that you do to yourself, centrists, right? So, fuck centrists, you know, like they're super boring, super fucking boring. And like, I don't know, my one friend, I was talking to somebody about liberals, which is a form of centrism. And, you know, it's funny because like we'll talk about centrists, but we never really like openly, boldly, it doesn't frequently enough get discussed that it's the blending of the red and blue in the agreeable parties of red and blue. That's generally centrism. I'm sure you can find other, you know, like there's going to be eco-centric politicians that would fall into centrism too, where they're more worried about, you know, as I mentioned, the PETA activists de-anthropomorphizing black people to make their points. Now is a good time to address that. I just addressed it. We're done talking about it now. If that doesn't speak for itself, I don't know how to help y'all. If you need more help, DM me, email, connect@goodmorningmayberry.com and ask a fucking question, I guess. I'll do my best to come up with a way to help you if you tell me what's missing from the equation of liberals or centrists and the math around PETA activists de-anthropomorphizing black people. For fuck's sake, for real. They'd be like, it's like the prison industrial complex. It's like slavery. It's like, can y'all stop? It's like, can y'all quit it? So yeah, marginalize centrists. That's where I'm at. It's very simple. And in fact, I'm finding that people are expecting me to hold their hands on some parts of this. They're like, I would like to be a patron. How do I do it? You know, I'd like to buy some merchandise. The Good Morning Mayberry shirts, the official Good Morning Mayberry shirts. How do I do it? And I'm inclined to give you directions if you need me to send you a direct link. If you're frustrated and done clicking around, I totally get that. We are in the age of convenience, and Instagram has now put the mall right under your thumb. They just moved things right around, so the mall is right under your fucking thumb all the time. And they Pavlov trained us to click there to see what we want to see to get our dopamine hits. That's where we would click for our dopamine hits, if you don't remember. And so now they've got the button in the same spot. I was good at not clicking on it. I didn't click on the reel either. More than twice. I got into the reel a couple of times because I post more than I check on the interplay with my posts. It should be noted, I'm not using any of the merchant features on Instagram because I am not allowed to, because I do not have a Facebook account. I'm so sick of Zuckerberg's little manipulation tactics. He is so high on himself and has no capacity to relate to humanity as it actually stands, does not recognize the gravity of the harm that he brings to the world. And I'm sick of people giving him money and attention. I'm sick of giving him money and attention. Me being on his platform is problematic. And I'm planning an episode about I have been banned from Facebook, essentially. It's been done in a very cutty manner, and it's difficult to address the details of the play-by-play of exactly what happened, because part of it does involve me being in violation of Facebook's policies. I did have 2 accounts at one point. The reason for my ban is not that I had 2 accounts. And at the time, in theory, they were supposedly allowing people to merge accounts, right? They were supposedly helping people synergize their identities. The reason I had 2 accounts is because I was raised in religious communities and around a lot of people that I didn't want to have the social scene of Occupy and Oakland's radical leftists that I started meeting in tsunamis in 2011 and beyond. I wanted separate spaces to manage my social engagement with those very different worlds that my identity has to navigate through. So eventually, after a few years, so I started the second account in 2011. In 2015, the second account, which was the primary account that I mostly used, I didn't really go on the other account. The account that I primarily used and started for Occupy, and eventually I added some people from my old account onto it, but one at a time selectively, as I felt like they could all interact with each other without me constantly supervising every post that I post, you know? It was like I knew that I had the opportunity to provide people places to have conflicts because I knew who the multiple parties were that would be there, and I knew the content that I was posting, and it would just provide opportunity for people to be confronted with opinions that they're not prepared to process, and I can't supervise it all the time, you know. So I just felt like it was safer for me and everybody involved to keep a barrier and be mindful about how I moved that gate. And I didn't understand that wasn't my right to do with my own identity and social communication processes. I didn't understand that would be completely foreign to how a proper person would have an identity according to Facebook's policies, you know. So they shut down my first account demanding an ID, which I'm never going to send them my ID. They're irresponsible. I don't trust them. I don't really want to use them for data. I feel like I post too many pictures. I write too many of my thoughts and feelings, my own process. I'm in states of trauma and rage, and I funnel it through those channels. And there is a very high likelihood that will all come back to bite me deeply in the ass in the future because they are irresponsible with data and I'm handing it to them. I'm not giving them my ID. They're not a utility. They're acting like one, but they're not one. You know what I'm saying? Like, to get PG&E, I might have to show my fucking ID. You know, to get internet, for some purpose, if there's some reason they might ask for my ID, I'm going to show it to them to get the service. Facebook doesn't have the right to do that. And for them to creep in with a product that's peripheral and then take over business tools and become this absolute monopoly in order to have any real thorough experience of the internet, that's an act of absolute violence. That's corporate fucking violence. And to alienate human beings from it for whatever reason, to create obstacles of interacting with it, especially for people that are in poverty, to be like, we have all the business tools, you can't come inside, ha 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 ha. That's been really limiting as a creative business person. And it's been traumatic for me to have strangers who are also creatives or public figures, speakers of whatever degree, kind of look at my identity and the way that my internet presence is and judge that to whatever degree, because it's like when I post on Instagram, I'm grieving my Facebook. I curated that shit for years. You know, I was on there like back, my dad had an account at a certain point, like I had one, and then my dad had an account and it was like, oh shit, dad's on Facebook, and he died in 2007. You know what I'm saying? So if I want to go and look at like our messages between us, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like not okay that they did this at me, to me. They harmed me. They stole me from me. You know, and I've tried reaching out to Facebook staff. I was at a Thanksgiving dinner one time and I was talking to somebody that was like, I work at Facebook. Yeah, I totally actually have access to managers that could look in detail into your account. We don't have any way for the general public to do that. We are allowed to bring situations to the table and talk to our people about stuff. And then we bring it up we escalate it into policy meetings, and we always analyze this kind of stuff. So it's good that you're talking to me about it. And then I mentioned that I'm hostile about Mark Zuckerberg, and this person turned on me like a cult member does. And suddenly the help was gone. It's heartbreaking. Honestly, it's devastating. And the amount of loss I've already been through, I needed my community. Having that happen is such a unique, profound grief. And I'm not okay from it. Like, I'm not okay with it. I have tried to get over it. People kind of talk down to me about it, or like they get it, but then they kind of, like, if people get it, then I'll open up more about it. And then it gets to a point where they'll lose track of what the reality is. So then it gets weird, because I'll open up to people about it and talk about how much it's harmed me and all the different impacts it's had, and why I'm not sending them my ID to just, make it go away. And they'll forget that I'm not on Facebook sometimes. Like, they'll be like, oh, there's this thing on Facebook, or like, you're on Facebook, right? Or I'll find out they've been sending stuff to the account that I can't access. And I'm like, bro, what the fuck? Like, I do have a phone number. I got an email. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Tumblr now. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, but yeah, I don't really want to be back in there. Like, I don't really want to be in Mark Zuckerberg's horrible, horrible spaces. Like, he creates these malls, these house party environments, these like exhibit situations that they're very toxic. They're like not homey spaces, and they're not comfortable spaces to be authentic in. And they talk about community standards, but learning about the history of Zuck and what the fuck he was up to in the past, and sort of what his life was like and his thought processes were like as a kid and a teenager. And then in college, it's just like, what the fuck, let me know if this is an urban legend, because I've Google checked it, and if somebody's got something else to say about it, whatever. It just sounds so fucked up that I'm like, is this really real? But it seems really real, Like, initially, Facebook was like a social rating system for these dudes that couldn't get the attention that they wanted from bitches. And so the poke was like whether or not they would poke somebody kind of thing. And they ended up continuing to employ that term as a slightly different feature in the public release of Facebook, as like a disgusting Easter egg for like rapey vibes. So it's like little shit like that, that I'm like, I don't really want to be there. What is that place? And then they go switching shit. They get Instagram and they start switching the framework around so that they Pavlov trained us to click here. And so I bet they tested this shit. I bet they like made the interface a couple different ways, and they were like, what's the best place to put this button to get people to click it as close to 100% of the time as possible? And the best place to put the reel, which like pulls you into a hypnosis state, is the posting spot. Instead of posting your own shit, suddenly you're like, oh, what is that? Right? And then the best place to post the best place for them to put the store button, the mall doorway, the entrance to the mall is where we get our dopamine hits, right? And then they move our dopamine hits into a very awkward place that no button ever was before. They absolutely tested that shit. They absolutely did. So I'm torn all the time about the notion of possibly getting my Facebook back. I haven't pursued it in quite a while. There is no Facebook page currently because I rely on other people to access that environment, and no one is available at this point to do that. That may change. Usually when I'm like, there's a gap, the universe provides when I'm specific about it. But I think I just really want to make it clear that like Zuckerberg is a centrist, And like, I feel I'm struggling because I'm noticing people kind of get lost in rhetoric a lot these days, like that they think Trump is a fascist. He is not a fucking fascist. He has never liked the government. He's definitely never liked the United States government, ever. What he likes is relationships with people of privilege and power, you know, and that's an autocrat. That's a tyrant. There's lots of words that are accurately being used, but fascist, he's absolutely not a fucking fascist. He's not right wing. He's not conservative enough. He's not fiscally conservative. He's not socially conservative in his own behaviors and what he expects and anticipates from others. And he does not like the American government. That's why he wanted to be president. He wanted to be the boss. And the people that are wanting to be the boss right now, essentially the same fucking deal. They didn't like the government as it was going to be. And so they inserted themselves to be roadblocks on marginalized people getting anything that they need. You know, there's no way that somebody who spoke like Joe Biden did about black people and crime, there's no way that I'm interested in them having, I don't want to negotiate with what they already thought and what they've grown into thinking. Now, you know, there's other people that I can be putting my energy and attention towards, you know what I'm saying? And then people are getting all miffed with me on the internet because I'm like, no, Harris is the Nazi. Like Trump liked the Nazis liking him. And he was like, oh, what's that about, you know? But I actually kind of legit believe that he didn't know David Duke was KKK until after it became public narrative. I low-key believe that. It's not important to me one way or the other. But because even if it was prior to and it was all kind of like staged up and I'm working with the KKK and I'm working with the Nazis and the neo-Nazis and these particular factions of different white supremacist groups in different ways, even if it was premeditated and strategized prior to the campaigning, the initial campaigning, I don't see that still. That's not fascism. That's him. That's autocrat shit. That's being a selfish person, you know, and liking the praise. And the allegiance, the power that those groups represent. And that's not to say that he's not a racist. I didn't say that. I did not say that. I said he's not a fascist, right? He does not like the state. He does not like the U.S. government. He wanted to be the governing party, and that is what he did. He changed the game and he governed all the ways possible, and he took over Twitter and he got in everybody's faces and ears, and he started that presidential alert system that he like never fucking used. He just like let us know, I can call you anytime. I can text you wherever you are. Just flexing, you know, that's not fascism necessarily. It's authoritarian, it's overbearing, it's uncomfortable. There's all kinds of terrible things that it is. It's invasive and violent and, you know, all this stuff. Like I could make a long list. I'm not going to continue. But it's not a fascist, right? The problem with calling Trump a fascist is that it took the spotlight of fascist off of the actual fascists. Because when I say lawyer cop who's jocked for the police state, right? Because like the police are tied to the state. That's, you know, like Trump might be pro-enforcement, but he's pro-enforcement of his own security. He's pro-enforcement of his own ass. You know, like that's not a general, like Harris's job was gatekeeping all over the law in the Bay Area while the area was being gentrified. And I mean, I don't need to do the work on explaining what's going on with the police force and the concern I have around neo-Nazis, the KKK, other white supremacist factions. Even small gangs, a gang of 6 white supremacists, a gang of 4 white supremacists, 3, 2 is, I don't like it. You know, I'm not real keen on it. The issue that's been happening, Anaheim is a really prime example of like a worst case scenario kind of situation in a liberal state, in a Democrat state where conservatism, where bigotry in a right wingish, in a reddish, as opposed to bluish from what we understand whatevering to be. I don't know what that's about. We're going to break it down a lot in different ways to the point it's broken. Like I'm going to take it apart and I'm going to leave it in pieces. I'm not looking to put it back together like that one, the red and blue and the dualism narrative and all of that shit. I'm just going to take it apart one piece at a time, set that piece down, walk away from the shit and back to whatever's actually important. So what is important is that these personal groups, these people who love each other, they know each other. They go to each other's birthday parties. They go to each other's baby showers. They best man at each other's weddings and shit. You know, their wives are friends and shit. And it's just mostly dudes. It's just mostly men. But there's all kinds of variety to it. There's other ways it comes. But it's not important enough to specify the other ways that it comes because it's too prevalent in just dudes that want to go be violent, and so they become cops because that gives them qualified immunity to go be a racist murderer. I don't know why that doesn't look like a straight throw line to centrists and, people who want to be in defiance of whether or not Harris is a fascist, whether or not Biden is a fascist, with the way that he's spoken about crime bills and black people. Those are human beings he's referring to that he's refusing to see as human. As an adult, he's a grown man when he's giving these speeches. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't, and the time it takes to change somebody's mind on things, you can't expect somebody, well, he went to a jail and he visited with an inmate and they talked once, and, did that happen? If it didn't, then he didn't even have an opportunity to change, He didn't. Like, if he was clean and happy and in his own environment, and like somebody mentioned something, like, it's not, you don't change from things like that. You don't change, like, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't fucking work. And that's what, expecting that kind of change is what lands us here over and over and over again in these fucking cycles. I really just hope that it works to marginalize centrists, because it's possible. It's a thing. Like, I can go round and round about like what's wrong with what happened, but the fact of the matter is all you got to do is kind of turn your back on them, and they start to like lose space because they get self-conscious and they recoil on their own. That's how shunning works. That's the math of shunning. They train horses that are difficult to train like this as well. You turn your back on the motherfucker and they stop trying to do their own thing and start trying to figure out what the fuck you're doing or what's wrong with what they're doing. So I think that it's likely that it will work. And so I'm just going to keep pushing at it and encouraging other people to do the same. And it's a very laborious process for me right now. It's been difficult because it involves me being very exposed and vulnerable. I had plans, on the topic personally of centrists marginalizing the marginalized off the edge of relevancy, off the edge of being even a part of the story that gets play. Specifically for episode 2, that was not the way I wanted that story to be conveyed. I had plans, and a white person with a platform that's not huge, but is in the direction that I was hoping for this story to go, who also happens to be exceptionally adept at holding space for me in a way that doesn't skimp on the need for detail, but also encourages moving it all along. And I wasn't in a position to be able to hold that space for myself, but I needed to move through that content to get anything else going. So I don't regret it, but I am disappointed by the fact that it had to happen that way. Yeah, and at this point, I'm just in my walk, in my life, in the way that I approach the world, I'm marginalizing centrists. It's going to be my New Year's resolution too. I'm revving up for a New Year's resolution of marginalized centrists. And part of that is letting y'all know now, so you have time to meditate on whether or not you want to jump on board with the notion. But we're all going to die if we let them continue to take up this much space. They're going to slowly push everybody else off the edge and then push each other off the edge if they need to, I guess. I don't know how a philosophy like that works ultimately beyond individuals, like throughout generations. Like, I have no idea what the goal could possibly be except to continue breeding from the center and pushing, whatever group makes sense to the margins of that. Because eventually you render certain demographics extinct-ish, culturally extinct. So painful. Pushing a group off the margins into a state of free fall and crisis and needing to recover from the impact of gravity sucking you into rock bottom and beyond. It just really, it doesn't end there is the thing, cause it's like in our psychic bodies, in our psychological bodies, if you will, like we can fall real far and then like end up in these pits. And then like, sometimes it's like, we get pulled out or we climb out, we find a way out. But sometimes it's like, you cannot until something else, and like, sometimes that something else will be like more painful in like a weird, unfamiliar kind of way. And then slowly you realize that that pain is like growing into a mass of some kind that's got dimension to it. And then that starts having movement of its own that is unfamiliar and growing bigger in weird spurts. And at some point you recognize it to be wings that are like not ready to be used for flying. But holy shit, are you growing wings? What is happening behind you? I think that it's a good thing to be able to like look really specifically at my suffering and be able to articulate it in the ways that I do. I like it. But it's another quality about me that keeps me kind of on the margins and probably has increased the frequency at which I've been pushed off the edge. So yeah, in my personal life and in the greater social community right now, I'm feeling very pushed off the margins. In the last couple days of November in 2020, I'm good with it, I guess. I'm working it out because the ways that it's manifested have been so unfortunate and directly traumatic into my creative capacity, into my ability to manifest with a clear mind in the direction that I would like to. I'm being directed towards oppression more than I want to be because I have other things that I'm up to. I'm being directed towards trauma more than I want to be because I have other things that I'm up to. And grief is something that I'm so unsure of how to address right now because I feel like I've been grieving my entire life, but it's not true. I've had windows of goodness recently. I was actually winning at 2020 up until September when Harris came back like an 80s horror movie villain to ruin my fucking life and body snatch people. It was like a multi-genre horror movie, like where it's like Michael Myers has returned, but this time he's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and every time he shows up, a lot of people fall into a thrall, a disingenuous thrall. Yeah, the body snatcher element was one thing, but then having like it turn into kind of a zombie thing where like it's almost like people were biting themselves. Like they would see a zombie. They'd be a perfectly fine person. They would see a zombie and then they'd bite themselves and turn into a zombie somehow. And that was alarming. And it was like it was like not what I would expect from a horror movie. And instead of being like, this movie doesn't make any sense, I can just turn it off. I was like living in it and it was my real life, I think the scariest thing for me was having people need to celebrate the demise of Trump at the expense of like they're not even willing to address the issues, like they won't, it's like a long list of at the expense of like liberty. I could summarize it into that. And that's unfortunate because that makes me sound like a QAnon don't tread on me bitch, and like I guess fine. I don't know, like Jesus Christ. But yeah, I know what I'm not down for is like lawyer cops that are pretending to advocate on behalf of the people that they directly harmed. What the fuck? I'm not down for a person that gets up and jokes about smoking weed after having incarcerated people, even one person. Could you imagine you do something and then you see somebody else doing that thing and you don't necessarily grab them physically yourself, put cuffs on them, put them in a box and take the cuffs off and lock the box and leave them in there and feed them and let them have some sun and water, shower them at times, like let them have a visitor occasionally on some kind of rigid schedule that changes depending on what resources are fucking available. Give me a break. y'all, like, and the thing is too, is like for like people that are feeling what I'm feeling, people that are vibing what I'm vibing, like, we got to just get more like comfortable with the fact that we're right and they're wrong and that we don't need to fight with them about it. We need to blow them the fuck off. And eventually the ones that want to not be thinking like that will come back one at a time, like so here's the thing that I worry about with like the Democrats and then quote unquote progressives or like the radical whatevers that voted for Harris. Like, I can't even with y'all. Occupy people that voted for Harris. I understand Occupy people that were into enforced masks. I do not understand Occupy people that voted for Harris, who was working in San Francisco when we were getting fucked with. Like, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't fucking make any sense. And I guess I need to double check and make sure my timeline is correct on her career transitions. I don't remember what year she left the DA's office, but I'm pretty sure she was still the DA of San Francisco when Occupy was occurring. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I need to look into that again. Regardless, it's like, I mean, so far nobody's checked me on it. I've been talking about it for a couple of years. Nobody's checked me on that she wasn't in the city in 2011. And for me, I was in Occupy Oakland, and Occupy SF and Occupy Oakland were in close relationship, and so was the OPD and the SFPD. In fact, most of the times when OPD was tear gassing the shit out of us towards the end of things, they would call in SF. So I'm confounded about the rhetoric issues, and I'm kind of sick of being pulled into justifying myself when people are spending a lot of energy giving their attention to talking heads on like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Like, I don't know what they're saying that's so important, I guess. I'm wondering what anybody's getting out of that. And they watch it for like hours, and it's like a bunch of jacking off. It's a bunch of nothing. So my encouragement is for people to kind of reevaluate the ways they've been training themselves to consume media, the ways that they've been trained to consume media, because media trains us to consume it certain ways. And when you change your directive, I mean, it's kind of easy for me because I move through different modes, and I appreciate a lot of different kinds of things. And so I'll recognize that the combinations of things that I'm doing will influence me in ways that I like and didn't anticipate, and sometimes in ways I don't like and didn't anticipate. Sometimes I do anticipate it and I'm not mindfully employing it. But then there's times, because I recognize all of those states that I can be in, depending on what I'm feeding my brain, I can kind of mindfully employ certain things when I'm in a good enough space to do so. Lately, I have been very overwhelmed and tired, and I cannot juggle anything, hardly at all. Yeah, I think it's like it's time for a roundup, but I'm not sure who needs to do the rounding up. I'm inclined to casually center myself. I feel like even the phrasing of marginalized centrists centers centrists too much, right? Like, it's unintentionally and intentionally ironic. Yeah, I'm just putting myself in the middle as much as I feel safe to do so and want to in the formats that I want to. And some of it is carving out a literal brand new kind of path in a few ways, which is something that I'm used to. Trailblazing is not unfamiliar to me. As a matter of fact, the crazy people that raised me, I was in cults. One of the weirdest, most intense kind of doctrines was about trailblazing and being a burning fire for Christ. But I'm a burning fire for healing. I'm a burning fire for healing the marginalized and centering the marginalized and making us not marginalized anymore. I'm done. I would like to be able to retire that term and be like, yes, back when I was a marginalized person, be alumni of being marginalized, And actually, it's weird that I say it like that, because when I said it, it almost felt like it's possible. I was being a little facetious when I started that line of thinking, but yeah, back when people were marginalizing, it was different, and just kind of rarely need to dip into that to make some kind of point at random times. But I would love a life that isn't marginalizing. And like, I think my job is to just fight it, like not resist it, not like wait for it to show up and then defend against it, to attack it anytime I want, any way I want, and deal with whatever fallout comes from that. And by attack it, like, I literally mean just talking, just saying where I'm at, what I think, what I want, and what I'm willing to do to make that happen. Because the things that I'm into are like helping people who can't get help other ways, folks who are in despair because of a need that can be met. And I like meeting needs, and I like finding solutions to meeting needs. And I don't really have a limit to that, other than I'm at a no mercy, no quarter point with liberals and bigots. That's it, you know? And that's not to say that I'll do anything to them. I just probably won't try to heal them. Maybe. I might. But that would depend on circumstances. And realistically, I probably just won't. I'll just walk away and do something that's worth my time. Leave that to God. The great organizing dynamic. The great orchestrating dynamic. That's the episode. That's what I got. We're marginalizing centrists, and we're doing it all the time, and we're doing it by just showing up and existing and acknowledging each other and encouraging each other to improve and find like good grooves, like sometimes it's hard for people to know like where their groove's at. And so when you see them doing their thing and expressing, you just adjust them a little bit and oh shit, they're in their groove. There they go. Right? So I don't know. I'm into accountability. I really go out of my way to seek it out. Like I kind of get why other people don't now. It used to frustrate me that other people didn't. I was like, what the fuck? This is so useful, This is so good for me. What do you mean? I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, I love accountability, and but it's got to be real accountability. I don't like unanalytical criticism. Like if people are not willing to absorb all the relevant details before they start regurgitating nonsense, that frustrates the shit out of me to no end. But when somebody has an articulated concept that they pump out, it's like, yeah, please do redirect me, because I sometimes am moving really fast. So if I'm about to run myself off the edge, please stop me. I have plenty of centrists to marginalize me off the edge. I have plenty of centrist-esque people, pseudo-centrists, to marginalize me off the edge. And pseudo-centrists are people who like you've just always had good medical insurance. That's a pseudo-centrist, a centrist-esque person. It's just somebody who's had their needs met, somebody who went to public school for their entire educational career, then went right into college, community or otherwise. Maybe took a year off, maybe two, and then got right back on track, which, the year or two off, still pretty much on a track of some kind for the most part. So the thing is when people experience that kind of trajectory, they often end up in positions of comfort that they're afraid to lose, even though it won't go anywhere. You'll still have your house. We will still have power. Everybody likes technology. You know what I'm saying? Everybody likes moving around fast and with limited resources, not being like cashed in on having to walk or ride an animal. You know what I'm saying? Have like a cart kind of shit. Like we like cars, we like cell phones, like people like that shit. So I'm not sure what the fear of folks who are worried about like making sure needs are met, and that people aren't getting poisoned. I'm not sure what's the purpose of letting an entire community live off of toxic water? bathe in lead and shit, what's the purpose of just allowing that? You know, because there's people that are going to exist in the world and like have a lot of time to spend figuring out what kind of shit they want to do with their lead head, you know? And like, I don't mean to be facetious about it, but I am actually kind of just like, I'm so desensitized and numb to the notion of it. And maybe the problem is that, you know, it's people that are exposed to lead doing a lot of the decision making. Because I was reading myself, I was like, so what of it with the guns? Like, is it like, how much does ammo exposure, like, you know, provide opportunity for lead toxicity? And the answer is a lot. It's a lot. It's bad. And there's precautions that can be taken, but it's not a great thing to be like, you know, kind of routinely firing guns without having proper protective gear. And proper protective gear would be, you know, not inhaling gunpowder residue, you know, and not getting it on your skin. And so, yeah, it just is like, I'm thinking a lot about the poisons that we employ in our hobbies, tools, comforts. You know, I'm not necessarily convinced that like cell phones are that great. Like I mean, like there's things about them that are not great. I keep my cell phone in my pocket. I think it's hot. Like it's a whole fucking data brick that I'm walking around with all the time that's got all these ports that go in and out of it that the data can leak out of or be suctioned out of by other systems, you know, and like then I'm connected to the internet and I'm constantly logging into things different ways and, you know, all of that. It's just like, it's maddening a little bit. Like I'm talking about it like it's, you know, it's functionally its thing, but the way that it's affected my brain's ability to process its own stuff and then the access to communication, the instant gratifications, like that all plays into the ways that I'm able to just even love anybody or like even like approach my community or approach my, you know, my anybody, my friends, my family, anybody at all. And so I just think about the ways that we're kind of poisoning ourselves in order to make ourselves comfortable. I think I'm not very thrilled by the notion of addiction. I think it's a boring concept that people spend too much time focusing on because I see it everywhere. I see it in non-substances, quote unquote. But then when I say it like that, I'm like, but this table's a substance and my phone is a substance. I'm like, I was saying that the other day to somebody and he was like, yeah, I bet if you ate that table, it would make you feel real weird. And like, that's a good phrasing of that because it kind of indicates that it's going to make you high, but it's just going to make you feel real weird splinters. So I don't know. Yeah, again, I'm sensitive about rhetoric and specificity, or more like, you know, not applying something inaccurately. Like that's the concern I have mostly. I think I'm done yapping about it. I think that I'm already seeing centrists be marginalized, and I was alarmed at how many people that had the power to pull vibes of support from the margins back to the centrists and show themselves to be inherently centrist in the act of doing that. That was really unsettling. It was a carpet being dragged out from under my feet. It was alarming. So I think that I'd like to once again declare a clear call to action to marginalize centrists. And if any centrists are listening, get back to marginalizing yourselves. Because if you're listening and you've been centrist lately, then you're like kind of an on the fencey type. And what's funny is my favorite Jesus of all the Jesuses, like I really like me the table flipping, whip slinging Jesus. I'm into that one. The one that came in the temple and was like, bankers be gone. Love that one. The other Jesus I'm a big fan of is the Jesus that hates a lukewarm motherfucker. He does not like a fence riding bitch. Pick one side or the other. Who are you so I know what to say to you? What the fuck? Don't be flipping back and forth or unsure about a this or that. Because a this is a this and a that is a that. Figure it out, right? And for a person that be saying some shit like that, understand Most of the places we employ binary in society are fallacy. Most of the places that we discuss it. Like, the way that we ask people, how are you? Are you well? Like, I hope you're well. Like, you're either well or you're not. Like, that's a gradient. And it's unfair to bring that in 2020 of all times. I can't believe we're still doing that. You know, how are you is such an aggressively violent question, too, depending on what people are going through. It's like, well, what kind of an answer do you even want? Like, I feel like we need to be able to disclaim our how are yous with, like, you know, like a simple how are you is like standard, but then it should become pretty common to expect like a how are you really, if you care to say, you know, something like that. I just don't know. I don't know how are we going to be authentic in this world that demands manners and politeness. I fucking hate manners and politeness. So once again, declaring clear call to action, marginalize centrists. That can look like having no manners one day. That can. Having the manners that you see fit to have, right? And yeah, centrists can push back all they want, but they're already doing it as hard as they can. It's not much more they can do. Yep. Anyway, let's disappear them. I have an amendment for something that I said. I was talking about Harris being the DA during Occupy. She left that position at the beginning of 2011, and Occupy was in the fall of 2011. So she was not in that position. However, it's a good moment in how I handle when I'm not sure about something, where I didn't quite say that one all the way with my chest. Also, my primary point isn't that Harris was in the city during Occupy. It's that, you know, if the timeline were staggered slightly, it would have been her job to fuck up our comrades, you know? Like, it doesn't really change my point at all, except for people that want to be dismissive and obnoxious. We'd like to thank our patrons on Patreon and everyone who's bought our merchandise on TeePublic. Find the links to all that stuff and our social links on goodmorningmayberry.com. We've got closed captioned episodes on YouTube. Subscribe, listen, and rate us on all the podcast spots. If you're wondering who we are, we is me and my demons. And you can join the Legion by following our Tumblr, Twitter, or Instagram, jumping on the Patreon, or just buying one of our shirts and wearing that around, drinking the tears of whoever you like the least out of one of our mugs. And coming back and checking out the next episode. I'm Shift. And always remember to never forget, if you like marginalizing centrists, one great way to do that is by centering the marginalized with your dollars. And you can do that on our website, goodmorningmayberry.com. You can buy official podcast merchandise, give a one-time donation, or become a monthly sponsor on our Patreon. And you can tip me, Shift Orion, your absolutely unapologetic host.